Дорогі колеги, вітаю вас на презентації результатів всеукраїнського соціологічного дослідження «Децентралізація управління освітою в Україні». Моє ім'я Лариса Денисенко, я модераторка цієї події, правозахисниця і письменниця. І перед тим, як ми розпочнемо і трохи будемо ширше говорити, будуть і панельні дискусії, і презентація дослідження, я дуже прошу вас вшанувати хвилиною мовчання загиблих військових, які загинули за нашу з вами свободу і незалежність, і вбитих цивільних дітей, жінок, чоловіків.
Thank you. Let's keep in our memories those who died for our liberty and for the opportunity to keep working, keep implementing educational reforms in the country that is at the state of such a cruel war with the Russian Federation. And it's very important that at the front line they are defending the right of our children, our teachers, our educational system to keep functioning. And before presenting the results of this survey, I would like to present to you the Swiss-Ukrainian project called DECIDE, Decentralization for Development of a Democratic Education. It's a project aimed at supporting reforms in education and decentralization in Ukraine to build an efficient system of administration of education. This project is implemented by CSO, Civilian Competences Development DOCU, and a partnership with the Zurich Pedagogical University, supported by Swiss government, represented by the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation. And now the floor is given to Martina Ramin, coordinator on education from the Embassy of Switzerland to Ukraine. Please.
Good afternoon, dear Deputy Minister, dear distinguished guests, dear friends, dear ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad to welcome you on behalf of the Embassy of Switzerland to today's event on decentralization of education management in Ukraine. For many years, Switzerland has been supporting Ukraine's education transformation. And what is at the heart of our long-standing partnership, it's strengthening the people, strengthening institutions that drive change locally in every community. The education reform in Ukraine is inseparable from decentralization. And decentralization is impossible without strong local governments. Territorial communities today are not recipients of the reform. They are actually its architects, its decision makers and leaders of the implementation. And today we speak not only about the reform, we speak as well about resilience, local leadership and the strength to protect the future during war. Since 2022, Ukraine has faced a war that directly targets civilian life, schools, energy system, cities, and villages alike. Millions of children had their learning disrupted. Over 3,000 schools have been damaged or destroyed. Entire communities have had to reinvent how they deliver essential services, including education, while operating under blackouts, displacement, and constant security threats. And yet, education continues, because communities stepped up when it matters most. In war, decentralization has proven more than an administrative principle. It has become a survival mechanism, enabling mayors, local councils, and community education teams to make urgent decisions immediately, to open shelter, shift to hybrid learning, restore infrastructure, reallocate budgets, and keep teachers and school children connected. This is why the strategic focus of the DECIDE project is actually self-governance support. DECIDE works side by side with Romadas to strengthen their capacity to plan education development, manage budgets, shape networks, and build sustainable and democratic education governance model. When communities are empowered, young people gain more than schooling. They gain career choice, economic opportunities, and the belief that they can build their future here in Ukraine. Our work with DECIDE is to empower communities all over the country. And Switzerland stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukrainian communities, supporting their institutions, protecting learning continuity, and strengthening democratic governance in education, even during wartime. Today, we will hear about the second national survey on decentralized education governance in communities, which captures the real state of education management at all levels. And I'm convinced it will provide useful evidence for decision makers and inform future education and local self-governance policies. I'm wishing us a very interesting and productive discussion today on the future of education in Romadas in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ramin, for the support of Ukrainian educational system, institutions, and communities at wartime. Now the floor is given to Valentina Poltorak, manager of Swiss-Ukrainian DECIDE project, deputy head of DOKU CSO. Please. Dear colleagues, on behalf of DECIDE team, are happy to greet you here, and we sincerely hope that today we'll be able to cover the key issues related to every territorial community in Ukraine, and education pertains to each of them. Today we're presenting the second survey. The first one was in 2022 after the local elections, when the educational administration was being created, and that was the survey from scratch on educational administration. In 2025 we ran the second survey and got evidence once again that the Romadas are at the forefront of educational process. They're very efficient in management of education in extra hard conditions for the children. Now we'll be given figures, data, and I would like to tell you how we are planning to support all territorial communities nationwide for the next 5 years, thanks to the government of Switzerland. The statistics, I'll share this a bit later, demonstrates quite clearly that management of education at community subsidiarity principle, democratization of education management is a very successful reform, and thanks to this reform, every child at communities nationwide has access to safe, high-quality education in the format that can only be given in today's conditions. The second survey covered not only educators and managers of education, but also teachers, parents, headmasters, and today we'll see a large-scale analysis of issues that Ukrainian government is facing. And they can be solved only in cooperation with the citizens, with the territorial communities locally. I hope that our today's discussion is productive and allows to make a step to the amendment of legislation, to improve it today and plan the reforms that, regardless of the war, are ongoing in our country. Thank you, and let's have a fruitful discussion. Thank you very much, Ms. Valentina. Now, let's move over to the presentation of the result of the nationwide sociological survey, and the speaker will be Executive Director of the Kyiv International Sociology Institute, Mr. Anton Hrushetsky. Mr. Anton, please, the floor is yours. Hello, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. I'm Anton Hrushetsky. I'm Executive Director of the Kyiv International Sociology Institute. We were happy to work on the second part of the survey, and between the first and the second wave the war started, and we need to understand how the target audiences reacted to this context, because we when we see the dynamic, it proves that regardless of all of the problems and the strikes, the educators and the parents and the teachers were resilient. We keep moving on with such complex surveys. The problem is results are numerous. We would like to discuss a lot of topics. We received the reports and we recommend you to read them at least generally. Now let's talk about the specific results that we would like to emphasize right now, and we'll be ready to discuss and to take into account in our further activities. Now, about our survey, we had 8 target audiences. There are from employees of the centers of central executive authorities and heads of the educational departments at communities, heads of educational institutions, parents, teachers, and regular citizens, even if their children do not are not students at certain schools at communities. Respondents were 7,500 people, individuals, with online interviews, and at communities mostly personal interviews. But we covered as many individuals that are related, that are participating in the educational system in all regions of Ukraine, and here are the results. There are several parts we'd like to discuss. First, does the community have a strategic document that regulates the management of education, development of education? The trend is that there's an increase of response that the community does have such a document. Among heads of communities and heads of schools, 60 to 80% of increase proves that they do have such a strategic document. About half of parents and teachers say that Haromatas have a clearly understanding on how the community is planning their educational process. Those who did not say yes mostly said they don't know, and awareness is still, by the way, is still a relative problem. And there is reserved optimism that we evidence. The further steps is analyzing the quality of the document, if the strategic document is in place, and our communities need support to make these documents filled with efficient content, so that it's not just a document, but a really working strategy that brings the community and the country to success. Next, the question was, as the community plans its educational activity, are the interests of the citizens taken into account? Now it's not so optimistic. 48% say that those interests are rather not taken into account. Amongst teachers, the results, some of the results say that they are taken into account, or rather taken into account. The question is this a subjective or objective evaluation, or is there a problem in communication here between the local authorities and the citizens? Maybe that's the reason, is that partly the reason for this reserved pessimism, or the influence of the war as well. Then the demand after the war amongst Ukrainians is to see a new generation of leaders and reforms towards something new, and that could be a reflection of certain expectations for the future, to see new people from amongst volunteers or the officers of armed forces of Ukraine to be in the administrative offices and positions. With today's challenges, parents and teachers alike think that their interests are taken into account, so educational sphere is still resilient even today in these conditions.
Another question is whether we need such a strategic document about education development at all. And the good news is that most representatives of regional military administrations and communities are sure and agree that this document should exist. However, there is such a trend that 80% were sure of it in 2021. Today, the figure is 58%, and the reason might be there might be all sorts of reasons, issues with such documents or issues with implementations, but we have something to work with in this area. Talking about the local self-government and educators, we know that they have a lot of questions about bureaucracy and reporting. We ask them how much time during a week they spend to fill in management reports, and we can see the figure 37 out of from among the heads of educational institutions that they spent over 30 hours to fill in such documents, and comparing with 2021 this indicator grew, and of course that it takes a lot of time, and the workload in this area is huge, and they can direct these efforts to other more creative things. We can say that the situation is the best among educators, but even among teachers, 20% of people answered that they spent many hours in doing the reporting, filling in the reports instead of talking to children. But 90% of respondents from among the leaders of educational institutions and 85% of regional military administrations leaders answered that a lot of information is duplicated, and the situation deteriorated since 2021, and both teachers and heads of educational institutions say that a lot of documents are duplicated, and they also say some documents are outdated or irrelevant. Among teachers, many say, 20-30% say that there are outdated or irrelevant documents in their opinion, and it takes time to fill them in, and they could use this time doing more important things. Of course, in the context of bureaucracy, the solution is digitalization. We can see that many Ukrainians use digital services, in particular DIA portal, and are quite satisfied with electronic services and decentralization. The trend is similar in the area of education, and 77% of parents say they can see digitalization in educational area. At the same time, representatives of the central executive authorities, regional military administrations, and educational institutions support digital document flow instead of paper documents. It's a good answer. At the same time, we can see that a lot of people rather support digitalization. For example, it's approximately 90% among heads of educational institutions, and 6% of those who rather support. We also can see the risk that digitalization will lead to additional workload that will not substitute the original one, and we should take into account these fears. Digitalization should help and assist, not be an additional initiative. The same goes for the educators and teachers when it comes to e-reporting. 90% of respondents say they support electronic reporting. It's good to see that among teachers this indicator grew and reached 90%. So we can see that the categories which were rather conservative previously, there are those who support this transition. We can also see the fear that it will be an additional workload. By the way, in some surveys, teachers indicated that they have to do double reporting in paper format and electronic format. That's what they are scared of. Also, we can see the pressure on the educators. They are worried that the online digital statistics can be unsafe and there might be leakages and other people might get access to this information. Another topic is separation of powers. We could hear from representatives of local self-government that a lot of powers are not sufficiently separated, and it creates an additional pressure and workload, and we can see that among the representatives of regional military administrations, 41% and among community leaders 51% think that there has to be additional separation of powers, of competences, and at the same time 68% agree that the legislation has to be further aligned. There are some positive trends at the level of regional military administrations, but it's an acute issue and it's related not only to the educational area, it's a cross-cutting topic which is related to other areas that local self-government manages. We know that a lot of attention has been paid to training of educators and officials of local self-government, and we can see a bigger coverage with the programs related to education management. For example, representatives of 41% of representatives of local self-government underwent training in terms of education management, and we can detect some growth in these indicators. 73% of regional military administrations and 92% of heads of educational institutions think that education is the need and the demand for such training, additional training growth keeps growing. Also, we could see in several surveys that there is a request for additional training. At the same time, there is a huge burden of reporting. Many people realize training is needed, but it also creates additional workload because we lack time and it has to be spent for training. So it's something we should work on. What things should be further explained for representatives of regional military administrations and heads of educational institutions? So when it comes to the education departments in communities, they are interested in specialized and vocational training. 48% indicate strategic planning. So it seems that most of them have documents, but they need further explanations about strategic planning. And others indicate procurement. Talking about the level of regional military administration, 52% say they need explanations about regulatory acts, regulatory documents. It's not completely, it means that they do not completely understand the separation of competences, and they also need further optimization of education system management. Infrastructure, it's another painful issue. On the one hand, we can see that only a third part of educational system leaders say that they have sufficient funding, and the majority says they have insufficient funding. And from my experience, I can say that school infrastructure is sometimes the topic we neglect, and talking about the last years, many respondents say there have been improvements. Some of them say there have been significant improvements in terms of educational infrastructure. now our citizens demonstrate resilience even though there are destructions and damages. So this movement forward is not halted, but it requires additional support. People are enthusiastic, but other actors should support this enthusiasm. Another painful question, optimization of educational network institutions. We could see different opinions in the surveys. Parents are worried about the changes in this network. Good news is that many people say that this network has been poorly optimized. For example, the level of optimization of the educational network is well assessed by approximately 60%. Most leaders of self-government and educational institutions say there has been optimization of educational network. We should also ensure regulation and funding of these processes. Funding is the cornerstone we can see in different contexts. We are now living in the 21st century, and one of the relevant topics is gender equality. And we asked questions about this gender dimension. By the way, in the context of war, we can see that men and women, boys and girls are involved in defense of the country, their own contribution. So we asked whether the gender affects somehow these functions, and most respondents say that both men and women can be equally effective, but there are those who think that the gender of the leader of the community is something that defines the successful management. Actually, those who could see this impact and said that men or women are preferred as leaders were given these answers to different reasons, due to different reasons. Actually, the students who should be leading changes also have these stereotypes. Some students think that gender can affect further career development. 22% think that men have higher chances. Others think that women have high chances. These trends are worrying. And by the way, 16% of teachers think that there are male and female professions. And since 2021, these indicators haven't changed, but parents have changed their views since 2021, and now there are only 22% of parents who think that there are uniquely male or female professions. A few slides are related to the decision-making, participation in decision-making in communities. One of such topic is community budget. At least 28 and at least 38 of leaders of self-government bodies and education institutions leaders respectively say they are aware of such tools, and community members also say they know about the projects implemented by the students. The situation hasn't changed drastically since 2021, but there are ordinary community members who have children or not, and they now know more about the projects initiated by students. It's interesting change. We can say that such projects become more visible due to different reasons, and even those who are not interacting with schools in any ways know about the projects implemented by the students. Another topic is advisory bodies. Of local self-government bodies, the growth has been from 48 to 60%. Most leaders of self-government bodies indicate they have such advisory bodies, so the involvement of the community members is higher. But there also were questions about the involvement of community of civil society in the decision making, and few respondents answered there was no involvement. At the same time, people mostly said that community members were somehow involved. So overall, the results are optimistic, but there are some nuances. Not everything is perfect, so we are moving in the right direction, but we have still things to work on. The same goes for accounting for the interests of community members in local development plans. There are those who indicate that interests of citizens are not taken into account, but the situation is better since comparing to 2021. Also, we live in the context of the full-scale war, and if we had lower attention toward this issue, it could be justified with the wartime, but still we can see the ongoing discussion, and people think that it remains important and the process continues. Another interesting chart. To the left, we can see the percentage of people involved in decision-making in communities in different areas. Over the last 4 years, the number of people not involved increased. At the same time, only 30% are not satisfied with decision making. So the involvement is not so high. At the same time, it's not converted into high unsatisfaction. And people can feel their involvement in decision-making process. They feel they can impact the decision-making of the community leaders, and therefore they are more satisfied with the situation in different areas. Another slide about education management. So talking about the quality level in general, the heads of education institutions assess this level as high. They may be a little bit biased, but teachers can give a more honest assessment. Most of them positively evaluate management in communities, but there are a lot of those who say this management is moderately good. Over the last 4 years, we can see that more teachers are satisfied with education management in communities. When it comes to specific schools management, 66% of parents are rather satisfied with education management in communities. It's a good indicator. It demonstrates that there is still room for improvement, but parents are rather satisfied. By the way, in the report you can find information about the assessment of quality of education, and it's interesting that despite the war, the quality of education hasn't deteriorated. Few people assess this quality as critical or negative, and it's good news that there hasn't been any deterioration, and we can see that all agree that it's a strategically important area that requires additional support and reforming.
A separate slide is dedicated to the level of trust to the local authorities. Since 2014, we've seen that many reforms need that baseline level of trust. When the citizens don't understand or fear reforms or the authorities, that could hold the reforms back. 66% of citizens said that their trust level was not high. About 1/3 can share a certain level of trust, and that is a hindrance because in the network of the citizens who trust their authorities, it's easier to implement reforms. And if there's no such trust, will be a problematic process. Now, concerning the communication of local authorities and its quality of that communication with parents and teachers, in 2021, only half of respondents called that communication efficient. Now, a bit that number decreased, and the amount of the level of ambiguity, of silence in certain things, and lack of awareness is already being witnessed. As we detailize the channels of communication, we can see an expected transfer to digital channels, social media, social networks, and the chance to cover a larger target audience is a generally accepted fact. But as a person who is at all of the buildings chats, parents chats, teachers chats, I can tell you for sure that there is a problem of communication on those chats for sure, and that breeds unnecessary conflicts. And we need to think how to teach people how to communicate efficiently on social media and in those chats to make it efficient and productive instead of polarizing people. And the last slide is dedicated to a call to cooperation. We did a survey on the preparation to implementation of the reform, and the municipal cooperation between communities were took one of the last places in this list, in this hierarchy. But there is a potential for cooperation and development of those of all these communities. But 74% of respondents say that communities have to cooperate amongst themselves. But in 2021, 89% of respondents gave this same response. Why did we see such a decrease? This is a loss of potential. That's an open question. But the inclusive resource centers are voicing this opinion when there's fewer children and fewer educational workload, and also creating and running the educational institutions such as lyceum. Not everyone understands the benefits of this partnership between communities, and that needs further work and development. This was the last piece of data I wanted to share with you. Next, we're open for any comments, questions, clarifications if needed. Thank you very much, Anton. This was packed with figures, tendencies, a very interesting survey, and I can see a lot of potential for agreeing, not agreeing. People try to avoid direct response and give a somewhat safe answer. I found it impressive that when we speak of satisfaction or trust to a certain service, education is something we work with directly. And when it comes to their attitude to educational institutions, people demonstrate a positive attitude more often than one would expect. Now I would like to give the floor to the panelists of the first panel session, Reforms in Education, Forms of Education. Natalia Kuzmichova, a Deputy Minister of Education and Science of Ukraine. Ms. Nadia, please take your seat on the stage. Oleksiy Rybikin will be here with us online, just as Natalia Pipa and Alexei Alekseychuk. Also, Ms. Valentina Poltorak, I invite you to join, Ms. Deputy Minister, and also Volodymyr Kohut, Interim Deputy Head of Poltava Civil Military Administration, and Taras Dobrivsky, Executive Head of the Ukrainian Association of Amalgamated Territorial Communities. Please take your seats on stage, and let's begin our discussion. I will be joining you shortly. All right, I hope that Natalia and Alexander and Alexei can all hear us online. They can join us and comment the course of our conversation. We're a bit out of our schedule with the presentation and the beginning of our meeting, so please stay within the 3-minute deadline when you speak. And my first question is to Nadia. The main spheres of cooperation between the Ministry of Education and Science and the territorial communities, what are those, please? Well, hello everyone, first of all. Now, talking about the key directions of cooperation is difficult because in general, the central executive authorities, when they implement policies, they do it in direct cooperation with local self-government authorities. If we do try to focus on certain priorities, those are defined according to the policies that are currently implemented by the Ministry of Education and Science. Some of them have been voiced during the presentation of the survey. This is the new Ukrainian school that is in stage 3 of implementation. That's about a network, the planning, the network of the lyceums, and the strategies of how the educational institutions will develop the school part, the school stage of this, and also the vocational educational institutions. The priorities also include the implementation of policies on cooperation with co-funding. Everyone here and online probably knows that lately the education sphere has the biggest subvention budgets, and the recipients and applicants of these subventions are the local self-government authorities. Each of these subventions includes, apart from efficient usage, it also foresees usage of their own budgets of the local authorities. For that, we must understand which projects would need strategic investment on a regular basis within the future several years. So, the bridge to the next year's activities, according to the approved budget, we have raised an increase of funds allocated for education, but in its turn, it will require even more effort from central authorities, nationwide authorities, and local self-government to translate these funds into safety. The shelters, the availability of education, the school buses, the fire safety, be fully equipped, having fully equipped schools, gymnasiums, and vocational education institutions. That's also about inclusivity and using this money efficiently, and the strategy of school food programs and the nutrition for our children at schools, and re-equipment of the kitchens and the canteens as the infrastructure for implementing these policies. I will emphasize these two components, the financial one and the support of reforms that are implemented locally. In order to keep it brief, I'll emphasize just this, but the entire policy includes the cooperation with the local self-government authorities. Thank you. As you mentioned, the funding issue, the survey shows a lot of concern about underfunding. We know that over 3,000 schools at territorial communities either were significantly damaged or were completely demolished. And the question is to Alexei Rebikin, Deputy Minister of the Territorial Communities and Development. What could be the instruments to attract new investment to rebuild schools at communities? As Nadia said, the budget has more optimistic data concerning the schools, but how do we reinforce and strengthen the communities, for example, involve the structural funds of the European Union? Okay, please keep it under 3 minutes. Oh, I will probably not meet the 3-minute deadline because it's the task is extra hard. The questions you asked are extremely difficult to answer in a brief manner. First of all, my apologies. I didn't want to. I don't know how contagious I am, but I feel I'm relatively sick right now. Hopefully it's not COVID, but that's why I'm joining you online. So I've been listening with a lot of attention to the presentation of the survey. The results are very important. I am an ardent supporter of forming the policies based on data-driven policies, and I'm grateful for this survey, for this analytical data. It contains many figures, a lot of information that we'll definitely use as a ministry, at our ministry, in our work. In fact, the Ministry of Development of Communities and Territories works also, among other things, the jurisdiction of the local authorities, and the separation of that is happening between the various ministries and the central authorities in the international technical aid programs, including DECIDE. I'm especially grateful to Valentina, to the Swiss Embassy to Ukraine, for helping us do that separation. And the educational services in these communities are one of the key services provided at those communities in general. Now, about this division of powers, division of jurisdictions, that correlates directly with the levels of trust. If we're talking about decentralizing of educational management in Ukraine, we need to understand very clearly what is the role of the ministry, of the regional administration, of the regional council, the district council, and the role of communities in this process. This would make it more understandable for people to understand who they must talk to, who to address in case of problems or in case of quality problems with educational services. Now, concerning usage of funds, of European structural funds, currently Ukraine can use resources within two programs, Interreg and Interreg Next. Those are funds of European structural funds, not limited to by territory-wise. It can implement educational projects, and communities can participate, other legal entities can participate. And it's also important to remember when we're talking about fully fledged use of European structural funds, we must mention Ukraine Facility program. It has very specific indicators, financial criteria, and directions of usage of those financial resources, reconstruction of social infrastructure, such as healthcare facilities, educational institutions, schools, and so on. It's important to fulfill the commitments that we previously undertook under Ukraine Facility, political commitments such as amendments to certain laws, and the financial commitments, which is usage of government funds to implement certain projects. It's important that the European structural funds do not include the pre-funding if the project is meeting the requirements for usage of those funds. It's important to understand because the communities are the key implementing agents of various development projects and reconstruction projects. Now, about additional instruments currently in use is the State Fund of Regional Development, which prioritizes the frontline territories, 10 regions, over 200 communities. 50% of this resource, in the amount of 500 million, was spent to build a network of shelters at kindergartens, at schools, at secondary education institutions. This program has been implemented for a long time by our ministry together with the European Investment Bank, and prioritizes the modernization and rebuilding of the educational infrastructure, building the shelter network at schools, at educational institutions, because in order to have offline education, these schools absolutely must have the shelters to hide from during air alerts, and at frontline regions, the educational process almost continuously happens in shelters underground, literally. So, summarizing, the funds of European structural funds is a process that we need to learn, that we need to prepare for. We have access to these funds through Interreg Next, and Ukraine Facility programs. Also, the resources of our ministry, just funds and costs. The program of Rebuilding Ukraine is the support of capacities for communities for rebuilding and development of educational institutions in a safe environment. And of course, our ministry is building the policy of good multi-level governance. So building trust to local authorities and local self-government and executive bodies locally is a very important criterion, because as the previous speaker correctly noted during the presentation, this is a key element for implementation of this policy locally. Building and keeping this trust is absolutely key. So, thank you. That's all I have to answer to this question. Yes, thank you. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you for covering these complicated issues in such a brief manner. And now my question is to Valentina Poltorak. DECIDE project has been working on these educational projects continuously. What is the role on the project of development of education in Ukraine? How can we improve the results of our educational systems and its functioning? Thank you, Larissa. Let me clarify that we are not implementing educational projects. We work with local self-government bodies. We build their capacity to manage education and to organize it in a democratic manner, and of course to implement reforms. Our project has been working since 2020, and a lot has been done by our team. We have covered almost 9,000 officials of various levels during these years. We understand their problems. Making any global summaries, conclusions during the wartime is extremely difficult, but today we can see that the maximum number of schools today works in online or hybrid format, and locally educators are doing incredible things to keep the continuity of education and the access to education. Ukraine is implementing educational reforms locally as well. The new Ukrainian school reform in a very difficult time. The new Ukrainian school is at stage 3, the reform of specialized secondary education. We, as a Swiss-based project, take into account that we need to teach the officials and educators to build any processes in a democratic way, to involve citizens to decision making and decision implementing at various levels, and keep the public aware of the reforms, informed. By the inquiry of the Ministry of Education and Science, we had public discussions nationwide. Over 1,300 communities participated. Over 2,000 state officials of various levels participated in this discussion, and hopefully this will allow us to take informed decisions even in times of war. Also, we help officials be informed about the current amendments to the regulations and laws. We have professional advanced training programs, which is planned to cover almost 2,000 officials for training and other hybrid training. Our closest initiatives will be trainings for the heads of communities. Together with them, we will be building the capacity to implement the reforms of high school, creating academic lyceums. We will be visiting those lyceums and vocational educational institutions, and this program will be available at all regions of Ukraine, starting with early 2026. We will cover 24 regions. Also, for heads of educational departments, we have planned programs of advanced professional training, and we keep studying the most recent amendments to the legislation that allows to implement reforms efficiently. We have an A to Z educational reforms program. Initially, it was a 3-month program, but now it's just celebrated its 5th anniversary. About 9,000 people locally join our webinars, our online consultations from the experts that we have in-house. Also, there are expert groups that go to territorial communities and help organize public discussions of the reforms of high school.
We think that this kind of communication and offline personal communication really helps to address different issues, identify them, then address and discuss, not only inform about them. And we think that this particular format makes it possible to actually implement reforms. We also help communities with strategic planning, and not only communities, the government too. We've drafted 81 strategic documents during the phase 1, and these documents also have the necessary funding, because you can understand that we can draft any document, but if we do not have funds to implement the project, it will be pointless. So it's important to keep planning even in times of war. It allows us to distribute resources in a correct way. The DECIDE projects help over 400 territorial communities in terms of developing professional orientation of students. I will not enumerate all the challenges in Ukraine. In my view, funding is the biggest issue we will have to address for many years to come. So in order for children in Ukraine to see their future in Ukraine, we are building the system where the community, the regions, the teachers at schools and business representatives help children see that there are enterprises around them. They can get employed there or get guidance in terms of employment possibilities, and business is actively involved in this process. They open the professional world to students and children in general in communities. Also, we will launch a national pilot project of professional orientation. We decided not to select 9 or 10 communities. We decided to scale up this project because the topic of future possible future for Ukrainian children is the most sensitive topics. That's why we are currently helping the government to build this system. Also, the topic of digitalization and debureaucratization are very relevant to any official. I know that the officials had many problems with the ICOM 2 system. At the same time, this system is aimed at reducing the volumes of reporting. I noticed that 94% of officials at the regional level said they have to duplicate the reports to different institutions, and actually these reports are almost the same. They have to send the same reports to different institutions, and it's a big problem. Also, the officials point out that it takes 6 to 12 hours every week to prepare notes and reports at the request of central executive authorities, and we hope that at the second phase of ECOM2 system implementation, we will finally see the number of such requests, and we will help the government to adjust the numbers of reporting. We can also see the need to decrease the number of reports sent annually, and currently the decrease has been by 50%, and when ECOM2 will be fully operational, we expect another decrease by 25%. Overall, the DECIDE project works not only with officials or managers, but with the citizens, the younger generation. We involve them in decision-making in territorial communities. So in the phase 2, we plan to organize training about school budgets, local budgets. We've already implemented 108 projects related to civil budget planning. Young generation will have to rebuild our country, fortunately or unfortunately. So it's important for us that these young people are active, proactive, and for the local self-government to understand how to involve children in different projects. Thank you, Valentina. I would like to kindly ask every speaker again to respect the timing of 3-4 minutes. Otherwise, we will have to limit the time for the second panel discussion. Natalia Pipa, Secretary of the Committee of the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine on Education, Science and Innovation. Valentina has already mentioned academic lyceums, innovations, the system of professional orientation in professional guidance in Ukraine, and that are going on even despite the war. We can also mentioned the reform of the new Ukrainian school, and I'd like to ask you whether you plan to introduce any changes to the legislation to support this reform. Hello everyone, glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. I will try to respect the time limit of 3 minutes. Talking about the specialized education, the discussions are ongoing. Currently, I cannot see the capacity of people to change the figure that was mentioned, the figure of 600 children in a lyceum. Most probably, we will consider the norm of 600 children in cities, and this figure will be lower in rural areas. At the stage of planning of lyceums establishment, we were discussing the situations of sorry, the figure was not 600 but 300. So later there were changes, and now they want the schemes suggested by DECIDE to be changed. Most probably the figures will be changed. From what I can see during the political discussions, the figure will probably be different. We have two draft laws submitted by Mr. Kolivoshin and Mr. Babak, and there are more changes suggested, and they mention no less than 8 children for one specialization, and they suggest grouping children most probably this will be adopted, and the figure we've discussed, the number of children in the Lyceum, is not something we have an agreement about at this point. We discussed that with territorial communities who do not have financial capacities to open a Lyceum, and I'd like to remind you that this number is justified by objective reasons. It will promote better competition between students, and it will allow higher, more competent educators, and it will allow to install an equipment of higher quality in the lyceums. I know that there is a deputy minister present who works on the matter of specialized education and DECIDE project. So the changes in terms of specialized education are postponed because first we most probably won't have the necessary number of votes in the parliament, and secondly, many families still do not have the solution as to transportation to the lyceums. Many think about whether they have to stay in Ukraine or go abroad, and for some, these solutions are still, these decisions are still more important. Starting from the 1st January, there will be an increase by 30% of the salary for teachers, and it will also be significant if the teachers think less about the financial issues they might have because of the low salary, and think more about the quality of their education. It will positively affect all the processes. Thank you. Thank you very much, Natalia. I hope Alexander Alexeichuk is with us, Member of Parliament of Ukraine, head of the subcommittee on cooperation of territorial communities and regions of the Committee of Parliament of Ukraine on organization of state authorities, local self-government. Hello. How does your subcommittee work in terms of cooperation of communities in the area of education? Thank you very much for organizing this event and for the possibility to deliver my speech during it. I am happy to see that the study mentioned inter-municipal cooperation because in particular because together with Vitaly Baskin we initiated this draft law to improve the situation in terms of educational cooperation in particular. And we gave the tools, simplified tools of intermunicipal cooperation. The next stage we are preparing is the draft law on agglomeration, and Vitaly Baskin is a co-author of the draft law. And the intermunicipal cooperation will allow the communities cooperate to establish lyceums and ensure their proper functioning. It will help children to commute from neighboring communities from the same areas, and actually the network which is currently being developed by the Ministry of Education. By the way, thank you for such an active involvement in communication with communities. It is something considerable, and communities can feel that. I personally attended many events, and I would like to say that the work was organized well in 2025. Thank you for that. About and the cooperation with international partners, there is a number of issues related to institutional capacities of our communities. Because of shortage of professionals, because of lack of coordination with international donors, not all the communities have such interaction. The bigger communities do have such a resource, and they invest this resource into such professionals, and so the results come. Talking about the capacities of international cooperation of communities in general, it should be noted that the plans and the intents should be created not only in the context of education. If the regions understand the strategy, and Oleksiy Ryabykin was also speaking previously, and he went to all the regions over the year, and he listened to all the strategies of the regions. They are significant for the communities, for them to understand how to proceed and what should be the place of education in the strategy for the development of the regions, which are parts of the nationwide national strategy for development. However, unfortunately, not every community has such an understanding. And again, I'd like to thank Ms. Valentina and our Swiss partners because the work they plan to implement next year in terms of education is very important. We lack institutional capacity because of a shortage of staff. The people who would understand what strategy is, who are able to explain to our foreign partners what they want to implement, why they want to initiate a certain project, and what multiplying effect they might have in several years. So speaking about the self-presentation of communities, we should have a strategy and an understanding where we are going, what's the place of education in terms of in the strategy. And that's why the communities having such an understanding achieve bigger results. In some smaller communities, the heads of the communities are actively involved in this process. And when Valentina mentioned that they are preparing training for the heads of the communities, I can confirm that it's very important. Unfortunately, not every head of the community wants to be involved, and they suggest that deputies participate in such trainings. They're not interested in that, but I can often see some heads of smaller communities who have limited financial resources who still understand the importance of this cooperation. And even though there is shortage of staff and human resources in general in their communities, they manage to find those who initiate incredible projects. So thank you for the support of the Embassy of Switzerland. Thank you for these intentions. That's my position. That's the information I have as to the intentions of the subcommittee. And if there are any questions, I'm ready to answer.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Let's move over to the regions. Vladimir Kohut, interim deputy head of Poltava Civil Military Administration. The question is, what are the priorities on implementing educational reform? Does Poltava region see for itself? How does it help territorial communities of Poltava region implement these changes. Please. Dear colleagues, greetings to everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank you for this invitation to participate at this event, dear MPs, dear government officials, DECIDE international organization. Yes, we do have very close relations with this organization. We used to be a pilot region back when the project was launched. Now we are fully functional and developing and improving education according to the priorities of DECIDE development of the regional education. Now, in general, we are working on the 2026 budget, and 1/3 of the budget is dedicated to measures to support the education, and it's an important indicator. Now, what are we moving towards? I would say that we're talking about capacities of the network. How is it supposed to work? We fully support the policy that the Ministry of Education is forming to understand how the network is supposed to be developed, because a school of 30 children and 5 children per class is not even socialization. Children do not get what they're supposed to have from schools. Then they go to higher education institutions and they get frustrated and lost. The next important step is vocational education at school buildings, for example. At our region, we have a network from 51 academic and 53 specialized lyceums that are providing vocational education services. And thanks to DECIDE project, we've worked very efficiently this year on equipping and procurement for these professional lyceums. We will continue to do so. Also, our next priority is vocational training, vocational education. Post-war rebuilding will require many technical staff individuals, blue-collar workers that the enterprises will need. They already have a lack of staff in this sphere, so we're cooperating with vocational educational institutions to train staff, future staff employees for them. There's a competition in the vocational education sphere. Another point to discuss is digitalization, and I participated in that process. Last year I was CDTO at our region and helped implement OIS, ICOM 2, Maria school projects. So this is something I know and understand, and as a father of 2 school-aged children, I find digital marks, certificates very usable, very user-friendly, and very convenient to check the progress of the children. Next, the cooperation between the communities, the inter-municipalities, cooperation programs that we have discussed as part of our priorities, and organizing the additional transport services to make the education accessible is one of the fields of our work. We aim at adding to the school bus fleet. This year we have bought 43 additional school buses. This is quite a big number for us. I'm grateful to the territorial communities for understanding it and co-funding this procurement. And what we aim is help build the roads, the infrastructure, to keep these buses functioning for as long as possible. So, thank you, Volodymyr. Thank you very much. We'll continue talking about that with Yevhen Konchakovsky during the second panel discussion. Now my question is to Taras Dobrivsky, Executive Head of Amalgamated Territorial Communities Association of Ukraine. We have heard a lot about the academic lyceums and the reform of the specialized secondary schools. Natalia Pipa mentioned that it's an important choice between a potentially important choice between this lyceum or going abroad to study there. How do you handle this question, this choice? Thank you. A bit of an intro from me. The war, the full-scale invasion, brought its corrections to our education and the demographics. The migration is part of the processes in the future of our country. And education nowadays is the capacity of our country for today and the future. And we need to rebuild the system to give people, provide them with high quality education and help them stay here. And the education, just as any other domain, is gaining in importance, and we apply increasing efforts to support it. We are grateful to DECIDE project, our partners. Since 2022, we have been organizing a lot of events for our communities, sharing best practices, experiences, analyzing reforms, implementing these reforms successfully. We're doing a lot for the communities, for the educators, and the budget that was approved for the next year is, I consider it a success, because at these difficult times, the educators are receiving their respective salary, their pay, and I'm grateful to Valentina Poltorak for analyzing the next phase, the next stage of the project, involving our association as well. Our joint task, our common task, is to keep our communities self-sufficient. We would like to invest into the education, not to treat it as the money-saving cost sheet line. Thank you for the presentation and the attention and relevance of education in this survey. The issue of inter-municipal partnership and self-sufficiency of communities. For some communities, it's already relevant. For some, it's on its way. Hopefully, next year, DECIDE project and our projects and our association of territorial communities, we can study it in communities, in regional centers, regional cities, and the communities should not add to the further urbanization of settlements. The village communities should keep their labor resources that they're losing to larger cities and for foreign cities, to foreign countries. Now, educators, communities, the Ministry of Education should all be brought together to take certain measures, certain steps, because there's a calculation, there's analysis for communities that are ready to accept, to welcome IDPs, and educators and communities that share their interest in creating the academic lyceums would be an instrument to do so, and our joint effort, combined effort, will bring to correct decision taken in communities at the ministerial level and for our citizens. We are quite close to the weekend and the two celebration days, the Day of the Armed Forces of Ukraine and the Day of the Local Self-Government. I congratulate you in advance on this and wishing you safety and success to our citizens in every domain, including education. We have no time for brief remarks. We only have 20 minutes for the next discussion. So a big thanks to you for this discussion. Hopefully we can continue it soon. Thank you. You can take your seats in the audience now. Welcome Yevhen Konchakovsky, Head of Department and Science of Poltava Civil Military Administration, Vitaly Turpitko, Village Head of Tereshkivka, Vasily Pelohora, Head of Education Department of Chernihiv City Council, and Alla Kostogris, Head of Educational Department of Reshetiliv City Council. Dear colleagues, please, I invite you to join me on stage and participate in the second panel session, Decentralized Governance in the Sphere of Education. Please, let's try to be as brief as possible. I apologize for this hasty format. This is a very extreme to communicate your thoughts. So my first question is to Yevhen Konchakovsky. We have started talking about the professional counseling programs. How do we help children choose their profession on the high school level already? Hello, thank you. This year we have launched two career counseling hubs in Reshetilivka and in the neighboring community, and the career counselor pilot projects have been launched there. And this is the starting point. A relevant starting point. It has to happen somewhere. I follow social network accounts of various educational institutions, and if vocational institutions inform in their posts about what the career path will be for their graduates. The university students, seems that at universities all they do is sing and dance, and no serious sense or career counseling to their studies is shared by those social media accounts, by the media. They are talking about extracurricular activities, but they're not talking about what the actual career path would be for a graduate of a university. So this has to be changed. And this year, in cooperation with the LLC Aurora, I think you have heard about this network, and the Poltava Consort network of enterprises are creating assembly lines for many enterprises, including Nova Poshta, and the students of schools love to go to the production facilities of these enterprises. This is part of the career counseling for high school students to help them understand what they like, what they feel like doing, and what they might be doing in practice after education, after graduating from their educational institution. Thank you. It's interesting to see how the processes function from beginning to the end, and ask yourself, where would my place be in all that? Next question is to Vitaly. You were showcased as an exemplary community that does a lot to ensure high quality continuous education. What would you recommend to heads of communities that are on the beginning of that way and are prioritizing education in communities? Well, first of all, you need to analyze the situation in your respective community. Without experts, it's virtually impossible. Second step would be to design a strategy also with the experts and then implement and monitor it. For example, the reforms of school food in our communities. First, HACCP is the first thing, the standards. Thanks to DECIDE program, we built the HACCP standard, and we knew where we're supposed to move towards. The strategy for every educational institution was designed separately, and as a result, next step would be fundraising. Our village budgets are mostly dotational, so we look for partnerships in the region from international partners. For example, educational system reform included reconstruction of food kitchens funded by an MP, 3.5 million in one school and 1.5 million in another. Equipment 70/30 funded 70% by the regional authorities and 30% by us. Otherwise, wouldn't have been realistic. And then creating our own content, building the food planning program that works at 10 private schools and 5 public schools, and then the monitoring of the entire process and drawing conclusions. We need to finish building the kitchen facilities at the 3rd school of our community and finish the procurement of the equipment. That's it. Impressive, a very interesting approach. Even separate individuals, the MPs, can be involved as the source of funding for such useful activities. Now, next question is to Vasil. Everyone understands that Chernihiv right now is the center of a frontline region. The situation is very complicated, but one way or another, you are restoring the access to high-quality education. What are the current challenges that the communities are facing in your region? Thank you for this question. In order to understand which challenges the educational infrastructure is facing and the ecosystem of the city of Chernihiv, I will briefly remind you of the year 2023 and 2022. The educational infrastructure was damaged by almost 80%. Out of 53 kindergartens, 37 were damaged. Out of 34 schools, 27 schools were damaged by various amounts. 2 were completely destroyed. Out of 5 vocational education institutions, all of them were damaged to some extent. And by September 1st, 2022, when the entire educational infrastructure of the country was facing a challenge to renew the education in an offline format and provide safety, their safe stay at the schools and educational institutions, the Chernihiv community had an extra task of reconstruct the infrastructure, and back then it would have been completely impossible without the aid from our partners. And the heroes that are our teachers deserve complete gratitude, and in May they returned the educational process to a remote format, and the summer activities that we organized with the educators to decrease the anxiety level in children, to support them mentally and psychologically in the summer activities in Chernihiv helped us bring 22 schools to an offline format, bring it back to the normal functioning. We did not just sit by idly and wait. We got to work, and today, out of 31 schools, only 1 works in a remote format. All of the others work in a hybrid format, mostly, of course, offline. And unfortunately, the efforts that we made does not solve all the problems. And for the future, the war is ongoing and the enemy targeting the civilian infrastructure has damaged 2 schools and 2 kindergartens quite seriously. We have to rebuild them repeatedly. Children need education here and now. They cannot wait for the rebuilding until the rebuilding is over. In our work, we organize cooperation between all legs of educational process to understand and forecast the work for kindergarten schools, vocational training, and without exaggeration, the most significant and structurally important is the cooperation of the community with DECIDE project. Apart from rebuilding of the infrastructure that has been facilitated greatly thanks to this assistance, it's very important to include the soft component, working with the children, supporting the student self-government, the lessons of democracy, educating children about their rights, helping educate the generation that is facing the great challenge of rebuilding the post-war country, but also valuing the efforts that the armed forces of Ukraine is applying every day, every minute. The children should value everything that is done in this country by its defenders, and this starts from the school up. I'm happy about the successes of the communities, and at the eve of the Day of Local Self-Government, I'm happy and proud of the successes that concertedly apply their efforts to implement the reforms. The MPs, the departments of education are working as one team. The city of Chernihiv cannot say we're doing the same on our regional level. The secretary of the city council is, we could say, virtually not present in the system. We have a civil military administration that does not fully understand, or maybe ignores in an intentional manner the requirements of the educators.
Unfortunately, no request from educational departments was supported. I think it's a priority. At the same time, another state authority, the emergency service, is acting in a unprofessional way, and it leads to disagreements. At the same time, we support positive changes in different state policies in the area of education, such as increasing the salaries for educators and introducing electronic document flow, electronic governance, logs, and our educational departments are actively involved in these changes. So thanks to everyone. Thank you for giving the possibility to speak today, and thanks to the partners and the DECIDE team for joint work to increase the level of education and to create high quality conditions for children's education. Thank you very much. I have a question for Anna. Democratic governance in educational system and schools is important. I had to cooperate with leaders of school self-governments, and I could notice that these people are very conscious of the responsibility they bear, and they know about the capacities of each other, and they react quickly. But how should we explain the importance of the decision making and the responsibility people bear when they are still school students? Thank you for the question. Before I answer it, I'd like to say that some people might think that today it's more important to talk about security, not democracy at schools. However, I am quite confident that especially now in times of war, democracy is highly important. We need to understand what we are fighting for. We are not only defending the territory of our country, but also the values of freedom, dignity, and we are defending the right to take our own decisions about our future. So we have to convince children. I guess children are already aware of the importance of decisions they take. I can name efficient tools that, together with the Swiss-Ukrainian project DECIDE, we are implementing in our educational institutions that we've been implementing since 2021. It's no longer about theory, it's about practical steps, and we could already see the results. First, it's school participation in school budgeting. In 2022, when the full-scale war started, we just had to implement this project, and some activists were saying that it was not relevant at that point, but it was important for children. And if we failed to do it in 2022, the dreams of certain children wouldn't become a reality. So it's good we listened to children because they got to see the changes as they still were at schools, and the majority of children were most passionate about launch zones in the educational institutions, and to teach children. We have been implementing the course learning to live in a community for the last 3 years, and it's not only about theory. When we learn about democracy from manuals and textbooks, we teach children to develop many projects to communicate with the local self-government, and children are not afraid to ask uncomfortable questions that they would be afraid to ask if they didn't have these special courses. And they were involved in developing the strategic documents, and participants in school self-government were even asking for the draft documents to review them and to take into account to do their contribution into this strategy or to get a better understanding of this strategy. So democratic governance is very important today, and I'm sure that we need to carry on with these initiatives in all the institutions. Ukraine will definitely win, and this victory will be multiplied by the children who are now studying at our institutions. And if they get sufficient education in democracy, they will be conscious citizens. Thank you, Allah. Thank you, dear colleagues, for very concise answers. And I would like to wrap up the presentation of the National Sociological Study. with the concluding remarks, hopefully we will meet each other soon, and I'm very happy that we all understand the importance of education, even despite the war conditions, even despite the context we live in today, and our children become become adults and conscious ones. Thank you for this meeting. Thank you.